Part 2, Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports, SI.com on next year's draft class, the Josh Rosen tennis story that Simmons and I kind of murdered on the podcast we did for The Ringer last week. But just following up on some of the NBA stuff that we were talking about in Part 1, I've heard so many people go, okay, Boston and Philadelphia, this series is a preview of what's the next 5 years in the NBA. Maybe. And on paper right now, it'd make a ton of sense. I mean, between the Sixers getting Kyrie and Hayward back, and the fact they could probably trade. What was I just saying? The Sixers?
Yeah, that'd be impressive.
That would be weird if the Sixers. Although Sixers would probably pull off some weird stuff with cap space.
They have cap, exactly.
Right. So, excuse me, the Celtics. Thank you. Great job on the correction there. The Celtics, Kyrie, Hayward coming back. The growth of Tatum, Brown, Rozier. You know, the smart decision that they have to make. Horford. I mean, they can get really aggressive. Then there's this Kings. Excuse me. Yeah, it's not the LA Kings. Shout out to my guys. But I mean, the LA Lakers pick, that ended up being the Sacramento Kings pick, which if you look at the life history of this pick, that could be another Sixers pick that's insanely high, but was also traded in the deal looking back on it, which seemed like a massive price to pay to move up from 3 to 1 when this last draft was this deep. And obviously in hindsight, it's not fair when you look at it and say, well, wait a minute, you know, Tatum, you had you got Fultz and traded a first round pick that could be insanely high. And so the Celtics could end up with that pick. The Sixers could end up with that pick. So who knows what these off seasons are going to be. But I would remind everyone, I just don't know why with sports, why we never pay attention to history, in that every time somebody goes, oh, you know, this is just going to happen. It doesn't. You know, it does happen sometimes, but when it's the long view thing, like Van Gundy saying the Warriors are going to win the next 7 or 8 titles, they may not win it this year. When it may have been the 4th year and it's still a chance it could happen, the 4th edition of Warriors and Cavs, and then you have, you know, football guys like, oh, NBA's stupid, so boring. Like, yeah, you know, look, the NBA has some stuff that's annoying, a little petty, a little soap opera-ish, but what if I told you there were 9, 10 people that sat in a room and voted on which teams got to play? Like, how stupid would that be? And I love college football, but just in a vacuum, that whole idea, yeah, we just have these people watch a ton of games, and, you know, 3 of them are slackers, and they vote on who plays in the national championship. And even though I thought they got it right this past college football season, but the point is that it may not be Warriors Cavs, and people wanted to act like this year sucked before it even started, and it hasn't sucked. This Houston thing's been incredible. This Philly thing is one of the greatest. It has a chance to be one of the greatest stories in the history of professional sports. It really does. Like, this is. Like, when you think about what could happen with Philadelphia, and you're like, if they're in the finals, are you kidding me? But here's what's more likely going to happen. Instead of 10 years of Embiid and Simmons, it probably won't be. You know, is it going to be 5 years of it? Is it going to be 5 years with Boston and the Sixers duking it out here? I mean, I kind of hope so. I grew up on this series. I absolutely love it. They've played each other in the playoffs 19 times. Celtics are 12-7 against them, but they've only played 3 times in the past 32 years. And the sneaky weird thing is I used to love Dr. J and that Sixers team in the beginning, and then I loved Charles Barkley, and then my father was so annoyed with me, and then of course once it kind of got it out of me, and then was like all Boston guy, the Celtics stopped winning. That's a little dirty secret I haven't shared with a lot of people, but I'm opening up as I get a little bit older. But for anybody that goes, well, no, the Sixers, like, we got this is who it's going to be, Fultz is going to be a stud, maybe all these things happen, but there are so many fan bases, Cerruti, that would tell you, oh yeah, you mean like my T-Wolves in 97 when it was KG and Steph and Hakeem Olajuwon, Barkley, Drexler, Mario Elie swept them, and then all Barkley and those guys did from the Rockets said about KG and Steph, and I'm talking about Marbury here, not Curry. That'd make him super old and that'd be weird. But they were like, it's just kind of funny because there's certain things I do remember as talk show topics back then before we had the mass talk shows that we have today. But it was, oh, dude, KG and Steph and Barkley being like, those dudes are going to be nasty. And that he even said it. They swept him, and he said he went up to him, and you could see it. You can find this footage. He goes up to those dudes at the end of the series in the first round and is like, hey, you guys just keep doing your thing. He's like, I told him, like, they're next. Nope, because Steph doesn't get the max that KG gets. And speaking of 97, the Bullets, they had Weber and Juwan Howard, both at 23 years old in 96-97. They were both basically 20-10 guys. Rod Strickland was 30. And by the way, NBA players love Rod Strickland. NBA players, like, you want a name of a dude you're like, who didn't get enough love that was just flat nasty out there, sick, couldn't do anything with him. Rod Strickland's the answer every single time. Write that down now. I don't care where you are. Send yourself a voice message. Rod Strickland. So that Bullets team plays the Bulls. They get swept 96-97, but no big deal. These two dudes are 23. They get swept by Jordan's Bulls at the end of this Bulls run here, so they're going to be good. Or a year later, Weber's going to be in Sacramento, traded for Mitch Richmond and Otis Thorpe. Or Oklahoma City fans, they're sitting there in 2012 being like, all right, we got 10 years of Harden, Westbrook, and Durant, and we're going to, or Harden's going to be out, and Durant and Westbrook, Durant and Westbrook are going to exchange injuries certain times. You're going to blow a 3-1 lead, and then Durant's going to bowl. Look, it happens all the time with these teams. We're just thinking, all right, foundation is solid. This is what it's going to be. So maybe it is Simmons and Embiid, but, chances are Embiid's, I don't know, who knows? I don't ever want him to get hurt. Like, people that have given me a hard time about the contract thing, I don't want him to be hurt for me to be right because I love watching him play so much. But I think it's fair to put Embiid in I still worry about the guy every single time he falls down. That is my take on that deal. I'm going to pick Cavs, even though I think the Raptors are better, but I'm basically picking the Cavs, Cerruti, because I can't imagine picking the Raptors, having them lose to Cleveland, and how sick I'll feel because I don't trust the Raptors. And I think the Cavs are in their heads a little bit. The Raptors should win this series. They've been the better team all season. I think they were the better team in their playoffs. The Wizards are a weird 8 seed. I love Markieff Morris after the fact, also pointing out that he thought the Wizards were the better team. If you need any more evidence why that team will never get it. I know Giannis said the same thing, but I kind of believe them. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Cavs against the Raptors, and I hate doing it, but I'm only doing it because I can't stomach the idea of picking the Raptors and having them lose.
You know what it just made me think of? Speaking of Bill Simmons, like his theory, his best player in a series theory, has taken a hit this playoffs.
Big hit.
And it's nothing against his theory.
Are you telling him he sucks?
No, I genuinely agree with
next week.
No. You tell him that I'm a big fan. But
hey, it can't come on, Cerruti.
Yeah,
totally
Cerruti says you're a
your
fraud.
Whole thing.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, your theories aren't legit. No, but I don't think his theory's bad. But like, Giannis was the best player in that series. Wall was the best player in that series.
Oladipo was the best. No,
well, that's a bit much, but. Yeah, I can't see.
I don't know. Anthony Davis, though.
Yep. Westbrook was probably the best player in his series, so taking out left and right. He may have not. The thing is,
like, man, yeah. I just love that Mitchell had that moment so that the rest of the world, you know what I mean? For 82 games or 82 games, but having a couple weeks like Donovan Mitchell just had changes everything. Okay, I have one draft thought. We're going to get to Bruce Feldman here in a second. The Lamar Jackson deal. I do love the way, like, the Ravens loved this guy, and they had to trade back in to get him. I don't know if Lamar's going to be any good. You've already heard me talk about all the Lamar stuff. I think it tells you a little bit about the league. Maybe it was the depth of the position that it took until a team trading back into the draft for the 32nd pick to go ahead and take him. It did get a little weird as far as which teams, QB needy, which teams would maybe even do something like the Chargers once they didn't take him in the middle of the first. Then you could see, all right, maybe Lamar is going to be in a little bit of trouble here. Those private meetings that weren't private, both of them with the New England Patriots, were like, oh, this secret meeting Lamar Jackson had with Belichick. Oh, it'd make all the sense in the world. Well, when they took a tackle from Georgia, you knew they probably weren't going to then also take him later on, because if they love him, you love him. So for the Ravens to argue that they love Lamar Jackson, let's just recap what happened with the Ravens in the first round. They had the 16th pick. They could have taken Lamar when they loved him then. They didn't. They traded back to 22. They could have taken him with the 22nd pick. Well, they didn't. They traded out of that and moved back to 25. Well, now they'll take that Lamar Jackson guy that they love. No, they took a tight end, Hayden Hurst, who I actually do like, and then they traded back in at 32 to take Lamar. So really, for all the Ravens pieces that I've read about how much they loved him, and I guess they loved him enough, to at least trade back in. They loved him so much they passed on him 3 times. I don't know if that is interesting to other people. It is to me, because I'm like, what? Like, hey, baby, you're the only one for me. You've DM'd all of my roommates. True. But they all said no, and you seem the most obtainable at this point. It's getting late. Anything on that, Cerruti?
Well, I think it's everybody's throwing on the Bisciotti audio of him saying that, like, oh no, we're not worried about a successor to Flacco because we have more concerns than that, and then they go ahead and like a couple weeks later and draft basically his the guy that's going to take his job. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. There's no way they valued him that high, but maybe they just didn't think he would. I don't know. Maybe they didn't think he would be there, and they're like, hey, we're going to have this one opportunity to kind of make a splash here. Let's go ahead and do it because our fan base is bored of Joe Flacco.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is, like, I read one piece. I forget where it was. I was reading all this draft recap
because that team is so boring. They're just so boring. They're so uninteresting. Their attendance was terrible. So it's like, hey, we need to do something. He's still here,
and he's going to play. He'll play probably this year.
I was going to say you could play Flacco at quarterback and have him be the backup and be like an offensive weapon type guy. Just get the ball in his hands while he's developing into being the guy who's going to take over in the future.
Yeah, I guess I just I couldn't read any more stuff like the Ravens, had always liked him and blah, blah, and you're just like, they passed him 3 times. All right. Little update on the life thing here and then we'll bounce. I don't have a house yet. It sucks. There's no other way to say it. I'm putting off the movers big time. I'm ducking them like a credit, a debt collector back in my 20s in New Jersey. They're like, hey, we have all your stuff. We still good to drop it off May 1st. I'm like, nope, I'm not going to call them back. It's probably pretty stupid for me to admit all this stuff, but I don't care. You guys know how honest I am about this.
Yeah, it's a good call. Don't confront the problem. Just sort of ignore it. I do that.
Well, this is the play though, because I'm going to get charged for storage. Like the minute I go, I have no idea when I can move in. I'm sorry. It could be May 15th now. They're going to go, all right, well, the clock is running now. So the longer I can delay that clock running, the longer I can go maybe having to get, charged $100 a day to keep all my stuff somewhere.
It's a sneaky savvy play.
Yeah. Like I think this is smart. Whereas 20s, it was totally don't confront the problem. Creditor calling, after a while, like anybody that knows the creditor game out there when you're a kid, or maybe you're just older and haven't figured it out. I started becoming numb to it. Some hardo gets on the phone and be like, well, we know where you live. I'm like, great, there's nothing here. Oh, well, you don't pay your bill, we're going to do this. Like, no, whatever. Like, I'll get to it when I can. It's not like I have a ton of money. I'm just keeping it from you. Like, you can yell at me and make me feel bad and get on my case, but this is my first rodeo, and I know all the mean things you're going to say to me, and it doesn't mean anything. Like, you can get as mad as you want. It doesn't mean I get a raise. So, so I'm trying to play the reverse with them and the mortgage company. They've been good. Little frustrated about everything else, but there's not really much I can do. Like, getting super mad about it isn't going to make the house clear all these permits. So I've been I went up to Carissa's place in Malibu for a little bit, which that's the other thing is like, how much can I really complain when I get to hang out in a place in Malibu? So that's what I'm trying to do. Positive West Coast Ryan, Hammond, Malibu, played some pickup hoops, Manhattan Beach, not very good.
Wait, what wasn't good? You or
me.
The run there?
No, me.
Is the run good?
No, I was just shooting around a little bit. Nothing.
No, but like the games, like are the guys that play there good?
There's a game that's pretty good, and I wouldn't even have hesitated years ago, and now I'm like, I don't know, dude. Public figure, sure you ready? Like maybe you get a couple get a couple 40 and older games, 40 and over, and run around with those dudes, and then you go. Because I still like to play in the younger games, But if I play in like a game with the guys my age, but I don't know. There's a lot. Depends. All right. I needed a ruling on this. I noticed this out in LA. Oh, celebrity sightings. Let me see. The Equinox is loaded with athletes, all sorts. There's one athlete I can't remember who he is, and we both kind of look at each other a little bit. And he's a pretty big dude, like super athletic looking. Jerry Hairston Jr. said hello to me today, and he pulled up in his car. Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, Ryan," and I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, I was like, "Yeah, dude. Yeah, I know who you are." I think I was always super annoyed by him when he was with the Orioles back when I was a hardcore Red Sox guy, but he was super nice. He said hello. He said we'd catch up. There's a ton of athletes there though. I'm trying to think who else. Girl from the NFL Network. It's a real who's who, Cerruti. You would love it. But what I've noticed is that the full sleeve thing now is so, as a non-tattoo guy, I'm never going to get one. But I could see going, you know what'd be fun is just a nice jacked arm full sleeve. Like that would, but it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, it's probably too. I mean, listen, I think they look awesome. I mean, well, first off, it depends like how it's done. Like some look like trash and some look good. You probably have to be a little bit ripped. Like you can't just have like. That's why I wouldn't do it because my arms are just there's really no muscle there or anything, so it kind of look funny and too skinny. It looks like you tattooed like a couple pencils. But I don't think at this point. If you just like show, like for instance, like Lionel Messi just showed up one season with an entire sleeve, and it was like, whoa, like you're 30 and you just got a sleeve like overnight. I think that would be too shocking if you did something like that.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to get a full sleeve overnight, and like I said, I'm not going to do this at all. But I think about it sometimes. I think about like what would I do? I think the Lewis and Clark trail with different historical timelines from your wrist to your shoulder would be cool. I think something having to do with nautical history would be cool.
Definitely.
Bullets and skulls. Like, what am I going to join a bike gang? Probably not going to join a bike gang, although they'd have better housing than my current situation. If I join a bike gang this week, I know I'd have a place to flop with an old lady on my backside. That's what they call them. Not offensive. Just gang terminology. Read a book. But yeah, here's the deal. There was a guy waiting on me. I saw Vince Vaughn at a restaurant last night. Didn't say hi, even though I've met him 3 times. Thought it was a good time to just kind of lay back. See him again. A guy had a full sleeve, and his right arm, like there needs to be a minimum bicep diameter for you to go full sleeve. And as you just pointed out, you kind of like you were the introduction to the novel that I was writing because it's so true. This guy had a full sleeve and he looked like he weighed 130 pounds and was like 6'2".
Now that's like the skinny rocker type. That's a thing too. Well, those guys are just like have like 0% body fat, don't really have a ton of muscle, but just have no fat, so they're shredded. That's okay, but you need to have a cool job to do that. I feel like you can't just be like a guy and have that, you know?
Yeah. We got a bunch of questions. They're not any good anymore. I don't know what's going on. Although one question was great, and it said, would Russell Westbrook be able to beat up Russell Westbrook? And I think that's the best way to describe his game. Here's Bruce Feldman on next year's quarterback draft class, whether or not Rosen, in a book I didn't read, playing tennis makes him a better quarterback. And then I ask him about who's going to be at their place longer, Saban and Bama or Urban at Ohio State. And the answer will blow your mind. He's supposed to be my neighbor, but I haven't quite moved there yet, so we haven't hung out yet. But Bruce Feldman of Fox, if not the best, definitely one of the best, most plugged-in college football guys going. I want to ask you about something that Bill Simmons and I were talking about in reference to Josh Rosen in tennis in the book that then you accused me of not reading, and I never told you why I didn't read that chapter, but that's another story we'll tell you off the air. But what's up, man? It's good to catch up with you. It's been a while.
I'm glad you were coming out to the right coast. Your life will be so much better. The only thing you'll miss is the Italian food. Everything else will live up to the hype.
Yeah, I wish I had more of an Italian background family-wise because I think I'd open up a pizza place right in Manhattan Beach. But you know what? We'll worry about that later. I got other things. I got to
That'll be your plan B.
Yeah, plan B will be Rye's Pizzas down at the beach, but I need a bed and a mailing address before I can start taking over. All right, I was thinking about you for a couple reasons. I mentioned that, but I saw a few guys, and we did this when I talked to Mel Kiper here on the podcast as well, and starting to look ahead to next year's class. And I don't know if people really realize how bad it is, at least today on paper. And quarterbacks have a way of, the closer we are to the draft, the more we start finding reason to fall in love with these guys. But after what is, and still some of these guys won't be good, it's an extremely deep class in 2018. How bad, at least today, do you think 2019 is?
It looks, at least right now, really bleak. And the one thing that I hate most about the way early mock draft stuff is that we end up really bagging on some of these guys, and some of them are college kids. You know, they're all college kids. But it's like, so all of a sudden I'm seeing, wait, Clayton Thorson from Northwestern, people think he's going to be a top 10 pick, you know, and
right, just your voice alone, and I'm like, oh no, poor Clayton.
Yeah, but it's that way, you know, so I'm seeing it. So I reached out to a guy I know who's a defensive coach in the Big Ten and an NFL scout who I lean on, who covers that area, and he was like, whoa, I'm not seeing that. Where'd you get that from? I'm like, well, easy back. I mean, I got it. It was on Twitter. He goes, oh, okay. Look, I mean, that guy has NFL size, but the reaction I had heard from people was kind of more game manager. When you talk to people around the sport, I think right now the guys who would make some sense and okay, these are guys on your radar potentially could be first or second rounders. I think Jarrett Stidham, who is now at Auburn, he's a really good athlete. He's had a kind of a rocky path to get there.
Right?
But,
did he just sit out too? Did he sit out the spring?
He's been through a bunch. I'll just say that in terms of even since he's been at Auburn, it's been a little bit rocky there. But when he came out of high school, he's in the same class as Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold and Lamar Jackson. And by the end of signing day, he was considered by some people, some recruiting services, as the top quarterback in that group. I think he's a legit guy. Drew Lock from Missouri is another guy who you'll hear as a possible first-round guy. And Drew Lock to me is interesting because he was a really, really good high school basketball player, did all the AAU circuit, so he wasn't doing as much of the quarterback stuff. And when he got to Mizzou, he really wasn't coached his first year by a real quarterback coach. And so he was really rough around the edges skills-wise. And then he worked out well with Josh Heupel. And Josh Heupel compared him a lot to another guy who's a really good all-around athlete, Sam Bradford, who he'd worked with, and can do a lot of the stuff, can throw from awkward angles just because he's really athletic. Put up huge numbers last year, against a really awful schedule. I mean, you looked at Missouri's offense. I think it was a top 10 offense statistically, but you started, digging a little deeper and go, man, they played some horrible teams in the second half of the year. And what I'd be concerned about with him is, especially with this buzz, because you're going to hear people talk about him like he could be a top 5 pick, which is entirely possible. But like I said, he didn't get really coached his freshman year as a quarterback. And now Derek Dooley has taken over as an offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, and those are roles he's never done. So who knows how well he's going to get coached this year. So to me, that would give me pause. And then just a couple other names that I think could be in the mix. Will Grier at West Virginia, former Florida quarterback. He's another guy who was a deceptively good athlete, was a really good basketball player growing up.
Is he white?
What's that?
He's white, right?
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah, he looks
it
like
is
Jesus a little bit.
It is deceptive.
But
wait a minute, it looks like Jesus. He has to go in the first round.
When I say deceptively good athlete, his dad told me that when he was in, doing all the AAU basketball stuff, his team once beat Grayson Allen's team in a big tournament. He could do 360 dunks. So I think when I say deceptively athletic, way more athletic than I think even West Virginia fans probably gave him credit for. And I expect him to have a huge year this year. He's got good receivers. The offense should be loaded. And he put up good numbers last year. So, I mean, he's intriguing. I could see him at least getting on the radar potentially to be a first-round pick. I don't know. He's not a huge guy, but he doesn't have the size that Rose and Darnold or certainly Josh Allen have. But I think he's somebody you're going to hear more and more of just because of the the system and the just the numbers he's going to put up.
I'm going to give you a nice plug here, and then I'm going to come over and have you sign a copy of the book for me, if that's okay. Because I feel really bad about this being your friend. But the QB, The Making of the Modern Quarterback, came out, was it 3 years ago? Or is it 3.5? Yeah, it's like 3.5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
See,
I think it's something like that.
All right, so I'm going to go buy a copy of it. I would encourage everybody to check it out. And I think the reason when you called me out, because I was doing a segment on tennis, not with Simmons recently, but I was doing this like a year ago on the radio show when we started talking about just tennis players and how weird they can be because they're isolated and they're by themselves all the time. They talk to themselves constantly. And I've played a little bit. I'm not any good, but I just know how weird I get when I'm playing the sport and how I start talking to myself. And you're in Manhattan Beach. It's where Rosen is from. We know about the family. We know that whole deal. What did you learn about him going and kind of focusing in on the chapter on Josh Rosen?
Yeah, that's how he was wired. I mean, this kid grew up as an elite tennis player, and so it's thousands of forehands into the same, spot on the tennis court. So the hand-eye was really honed but also some of the stuff you were talking about on that podcast, and some of the stuff you were saying, before about the quirky, very isolated, insular tennis way, that was him for a long time in that sport. And so he was going to be, an elite tennis player if he opted to stay in that route. But, at some point, he had said that he had really, his body was outgrowing it. His feet were big. He was not the average sized tennis player. So we're a guy who all of a sudden people look at and go, wow, he's got really good footwork and everything. When he was comparing himself to other, top 10 national tennis players in his age, he was dwarfing them. And he was like, wow, those guys are a lot more nimble than I am. And so what's interesting looking back at this was when I started, kind of kicking around with like this quarterback crop, especially him, because it was fascinating. He's in, literally I would walk across to go to the gym, like right next to the tennis club that he grew up training at. And so I had talked to Tom House, who's Tom Brady's guy and who's Drew Brees' guy and former, major league pitcher, and he's the leading like sports biomechanics guy in the country. And I got to know Tom pretty well while working on the book, and I said, hey, I got this kid. He's a high school junior from like basically my town, and he grew up as a competitive tennis player. I mean, that was all he did for a long time, and now he's branched out to football. He's really talented. And I said, do you see the correlations of how does that benefit him? And he said, no doubt it does. And then he pointed out that Drew Brees was his guy for, 10 years, plus that he worked with. And Drew Brees was an elite tennis player, not as good as Josh was, but he was so good that he beat Andy Roddick in a match. Now, I think Drew is a couple of years older than Andy, but still, I think it was like something where he was maybe 2 years older, but the fact that he could beat him, I think speaks to how good he was. And obviously Drew Brees has phenomenal footwork for a quarterback. And so, it took that a little further as this draft process went on. Josh Rosen ended up working with Tom House, not because of me, but it just like shows you how small that world really is and those guys connected. So we'll see. I mean, before the Drew Brees, Josh Rosen tennis quarterback thing, the only other guy I knew of who was a quarterback and a tennis player, this is a blast from the past for you, our old ESPN colleague, Jim Donnan, who played college in the 60s, I think was like an all-ACC tennis player and also like a really good quarterback at NC State, but, that was obviously a different era, but, it was somewhat applicable there.
Yeah, he was there on my way in. I mean, that was a long time ago. I remember Stanford Steve like loved him because they would talk games all the time. And then I think Jim had there was like a nickname for the games he liked. They'd call him Jim Steamers or something. I don't even know if that's, I don't know. I forget because like Stanford Steve is young and this was all like, I was just 30, I think. And Stanford Steve's a couple years younger than me and he would come in and be like, oh, Don and Steamers. He's got like 3 ACC games he loves this week. And I would just like laugh my head off and he would come by and hang out and then, didn't really hear from him again. Hey, is Rosen, cause I do this and I'll ask people, cause I always think it's funny when people think a quarterback like is a jerk. And I get, okay, you gotta everybody like you, but I don't know if they have to love you. I think they just have to respect you and trust that like when you break the huddle, they believe in you. You know what I mean? Anybody that's ever played the position, when you're playing and you break the huddle and you can tell nobody really has confidence in you, it's an awful, awful feeling. And Rosen can be a jerk. I just don't know if it's like a jerk to the level that's detrimental to his own growth or, detrimental to how a locker room will react to him. Because I think all of us know like, a lot of the high school QBs were jerks. They were bullies, because life was awesome for them. In college, you're going to get sorted out a little bit here and there, but I'll never just be turned off because a guy appears to be abrasive, especially when I know deep down all of these guys that I'm talking about all the time, I don't know any of them. I don't know any of them. I've met them a few times. But that doesn't mean I know who they are as people.
No, and I think in the same. Look, I spent a ton of time around Baker Mayfield relative to what I've spent around, other college football players. I can't say I know him, that well. So what I would go by is I do know a lot of people who've been around the UCLA football program. I know 2 of the 3 offensive coordinators, that Rosen had, and I know those guys really well. I've had conversations with a lot of just people around the program, and what you keep getting back to is it's the people who probably don't know Josh Rosen very well that may have had either one interaction and thought it was a little awkward or something, and that's where it starts to lead to the whispers, about like, oh, he's not a football guy or, whatever. I think the thing that, was kind of like a head scratcher to me is when people are starting to talk about, oh, well, he comes from a lot of money. Guess what? A lot of quarterbacks come from a ton of money. You know why I know that? Because they train with these private quarterback coaches who are, commanding thousands of dollars for them. And a lot of them have been doing it since they were in 7th grade. So that doesn't make him very different. Like I said, I think, sometimes people say, oh, he comes from Manhattan Beach or whatever, and they, there's a lot of rich places. I mean, USC's had a bunch of quarterbacks who come from, Orange County and pretty well-off places. I think there's a lot of guys who fit that mold where they come from maybe more than they are, more than a lot of their teammates are. And I just think people get so hung up on it because, you said before, it's like, people are looking for something with a fine-tooth comb, and if you want to believe it, it's there. I mean, I trust the guys who have, either worked with him or spent a bunch of time around him. To me, the biggest concern with Josh Rosen is this, and it's not toughness. I think it's just the durability factor. I mean, he had concussions. He was banged up. Now, the reason why I wouldn't say toughness is because I know one of the defensive coordinators in the Pac-12 told me, he was like, we blitzed the hell out of him. We blitzed him 46 times. He kept on getting back up. He's tough as hell. So it wasn't that, but it is durability falls into a kind of a little bit of a different category. And, we'll see how he holds up. I know he got drafted into a really good situation, though.
Yeah, he's my favorite one. I think I saw him do more NFL stuff. That's always my go-to line with Rosen. I saw him do more NFL stuff than any of the other guys. But it doesn't.
Hey, towards that, Ryan, one quick thing. It was a Thursday night game, UCLA against Cal. It was his true freshman year, and I sat by the guy who's now, I think, the GM of the Tennessee Titans and a bunch of other NFL personnel people, and they were, I don't know if they were all there to see Jared Goff, but Jared Goff was the big buzz there. Josh Rosen looked like twice the player Jared did. And I'm not saying, Jared's, Tom Brady or anything, but Jared's turned out to be, looks like he's going to be a really good NFL quarterback. And I think Josh has all that stuff that people love Jared Goff for. And I think there's probably even more, more juice in him than that. Now, maybe Jared has some things that people, his personality is a little more even keel, and that probably sits well. But if you asked anybody that night, I think they would have told you Josh Rosen's a much more talented quarterback than Jared Goff.
Wow. But I don't think that's shocking. That actually doesn't shock me now when I think about just the nights where I've looked at Rosen and been really impressed. I got to make sure I was off mic there a little bit. I apologize to all the listeners. Right now well, I know you are a parent, but let's go. You have a kid. He's getting ready to sign. Everybody wants him. Every major program wants him. He's a quarterback. You want him to play in the NFL. Everybody's on the same page. Give me the program, the D1 program that you would most trust to take your top prospect quarterback kid and groom him for the NFL.
It's hard because I look at that and I sit there and go, I'm not playing to Stanford Steve here, but like if my kid, you got a pro style offense and you got the best education in major college football at Stanford, you have everything you think you would need. You're going to play behind what's probably going to be a really good offensive line. But the part that's missing is since Andrew Luck's been there, they have struggled to develop a guy. And so that gives me a little bit of hesitation. But I would start with that. I mean, there's other programs that have produced a lot of, probably a lot more prominent quarterbacks of late. I would consider, though, all the things that are involved in that. And that's why I said, to me, as long as David Shaw's there, I think Stanford would be a tough option to look in the other direction from, because whatever you see here, I mean, look at the last couple of drafts. I mean, the staff that's now at Wyoming has had two guys who were top 10 picks in the last 3 years. But I wouldn't, think realistically, wouldn't want to send my son if he was the greatest high school prospect into the Mountain West. I mean, it just, I'm just being realistic.
Right? Yeah, right. Would you have answered Harbaugh 2 years ago?
I probably would have, because back then he had a grad transfer in Jake Rudock who played well, better than he did at Iowa, and he had that track record of what he'd been doing, and it was rolling. But now, I mean, I did a Michigan game last year where Wilton Speight got hurt, and then John O'Korn went in there. You would think they would be a lot better, but to me, it speaks to a little bit, I don't want to use the word dysfunction because that's too strong, but it speaks to a little bit of the staff instability that was around there. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was Jed Fish working with Jim Harbaugh on the passing game. Jed left to go to UCLA, and then Pep Hamilton came in, and it struggled. And now Jim McElwain's there, and we'll see how it goes. Pep's still there, so yeah, it's a little shakier, no doubt. I mean, look, one of the wild cards to me in this whole quarterback 2019 talk, and it's a big wild card, but because he hasn't been named the starter yet, but Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State is a super talented kid. He can throw the heck out of the ball. I spent a little bit of time in Columbus last week, and that system, with Ryan Day there, with Kevin Wilson, the way Urban Meyer structures things, they develop players. They're going to be around a ton of talent. That would be a definite consideration. If you're looking at where is the kid going to really get groomed. Now, the question is, who's going to be the guy, one of these staffs, and I think it's hard to kind of frame it this way, but if you really love the offensive coordinator, if it's at a school like that, the offensive coordinator, by the time your kid's a sophomore or junior, he might be a head coach someplace else, just like Tom Herman was.
Yeah, that's why I love Haskins was the kid that all the recruits were saying start right over JT. Wasn't that the thing?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. I mean, he can throw the
and
hell
he came
out of the
in.
ball.
He actually looks really impressive. So
he looked really good against Michigan. The only knock on him is just, I don't think it's maturity, but when I talked to one of the strength coach there, it was just like he's getting to the levels of what we want, into the, not even to the elite levels of like working and all the intangible stuff that they're trying to measure, the stuff that JT Barrett, quite honestly, was like almost off the charts for them at. And so now this kid's gotten better, but he's being pushed. There's a kid there who's a coach's son, Joe Burrow, who's talented, really talented. So I think that's a good battle, but Haskins' arm is a wow arm, and he's got everything in place where if he takes over that job, I could see people buzzing about Dwayne Haskins because his arm is better than almost every guy that was listed on those mock drafts.
Is this a lame question, which is an awesome tease? And if you go, hey, I don't want to answer that because I'm just guessing because it's stupid, but it's great for television. If I were doing a radio show, I'd say we'll have Bruce Feldman on next to ask him who'll be at his post longer, Saban at Bama or Meyer at Ohio State next. But I'm going to ask it to you anyway.
Yeah, my guess is it'd be Saban, just because I think
he'll be that Bama.
Even though he's what's
older.
that?
So you think Bama? All right, sorry. Go ahead. Just answer. I interrupted you.
Even though he's 10 years older, Urban's only 53. I mean,
I know.
Saban's
that's why I was shocked.
Mid-60s. But I just don't see Urban wanting to coach when he's 60. And, I could definitely see Nick Saban. The only other thing I could see Nick Saban doing is not go to the NFL, but I could see him, sit on the set with Reese Davis and Kirk and do something because he's good at it. And I could see him doing that. But right now, he's so built it he's got everything the way he exactly could want it to be there in Tuscaloosa. Whereas, I have this story coming out later this week about Urban Meyer, and basically the headline of the story is what keeps Urban Meyer up at night these days. And it's not has nothing to do with Tuscaloosa. It definitely has nothing to do with what's going on in Ann Arbor. It has everything to do with all these other real-world issues that he's kind of consumed by. And it's almost like he's very frenetic in it. I just, I could see him coaching a few more years. I just don't see him coaching when he's 60, whereas I don't see what's slowing down Nick Saban at any point. I just think he's a football machine right now.
Wow, I think that would surprise a lot of people because the age thing that you say there. Can you give us any hint on, your story's coming out, so I don't want to ruin it, but can you give us any hint and share anything on that Urban thing?
Yeah, what it really is so we had my crew at Fox, we had Ohio State twice, And you go into his office on Friday afternoons, and the TV is always on to cable news, like 24-hour news. And he is just so, I talked to a lot of guys close to him on the staff and him, and we kind of just like almost like hit a nerve where he was really interested in talking about it. But he is so, again, consumed with all of this stuff.
We're talking like Trump, world politics here? We're talking day-to-day this?
Yeah. I mean, this is what he said. He goes, right now I have what he's called our 4 pillars. And he said it is the issue of the opioid crisis. It is the issue of anxiety and depression. It is the issue of sexual violence. And the 4th one was concussions. And he said, it's like, are we doing enough for our players to keep them on top of all these things? And so, when I heard the opioid crisis, now obviously I know a lot of college football players and just a lot of people are, get involved with marijuana. And I've turned on the news enough to know about the opioid crisis. But I said, how did it kind of cross into such a realm with him? And one of the guys he works with on staff just said, when he goes out on the road and he goes recruiting, he went to the hometown he was from, and it's Northeast Ohio, and that place is like, I guess it's overrun with it. And so it just becomes one of these things where I think he sees it, he hears about it, and it's just like, he's got to do something about it. And so that becomes a huge thing, not just for him, but then for that staff where probably more so than any other staff I've heard of, they are really, engaged with their players on what do we need to do and how do we need to handle this? I mean, everything from the police, community relations stuff to the Kaepernick protests. It was just kind of eye-opening to hear these guys talk about it as much as they did.
That story's coming out. When were we going to be able to see that one?
Should be able to see it by the time this podcast is up. It's supposed to go up, I think, actually. We're talking Monday afternoon, and it's supposed to go up Tuesday morning.
Okay, and where you'll have that on?
Yes, it'll be on SI.com.
Okay, SI.com. Just making sure. Okay, hey man, thanks a lot. And hopefully next time I talk to you, it'll be in person and we'll be neighbors, and I can show you my place. But I'm not banking.
That would be awesome. So I'll bring the booze, and you can bring the sunshine.
All right, man. I just need an address. Thanks, Bruce. Talk to you soon.
All right, anytime. Take care.